You are listening to NSR, National Scrubs Radio, where nurses, doctors, students, and other healthcare professionals bring you stories from scrubs across the nation. Tune in today with NSR's Derek J.
So welcome to NSR, that's National Scrubs Radio. This is Derek J, your host. My guest today, his name is Art Zimmet. He is the founder of Paradigm Care. They are a medical transport company on commercial air. So what happens if you get injured in a different country or even away from home in a different state? Well, this is one of the services that Art provides by transporting patients, but not through an air ambulance. Travel insurance, do you need it? Art goes over whether or not if you need that type of insurance. So the nursing community, listen up. If you're in the ER, ICU, or if you want to learn how to get into this industry, Art talks about how to do it. He goes over how he incorporates the platinum rule, not the golden rule, but the platinum rule. You hear about that. Here's Art. So welcome to the show, Art.
First, I want to thank you, Derek, for having me on the show. I'm a big fan of what you're doing with the National Scrubs Radio. I've been listening to some of the shows, and I'm a big fan. So it's an honor to be on today, and thank you for that opportunity.
So Art, before we started the podcast, we talked a little bit, and on your website for Paradigm Care, it says that it's a medical transport on commercial air. How's that different than the air ambulance? Because I've had friends that have worked on the air ambulance before. So
what we do, the industry calls us a commercial escort company, and that's in comparison to an air ambulance company. So air ambulances are basically flying ICUs. They're chartered or private aircraft that have all the equipment that an ICU has. And you can contrast that with what we do. We transport patients only on commercial aircraft. So our patients have to be stable enough to fly commercially, yet also have some type of condition that requires a nurse or paramedic to accompany them on their trip.
So Art, give me a snapshot of what Paradigm Care does as a commercial escort company.
We arrange all the bedside to bedside logistics of the transport, and we accompany the patient with the nurse. So we will talk to the departing facility, look at the medical records, examine whether the patient fits within our guidelines for travel. We coordinate with the airlines. They have their specific requirements that need to be met. We communicate with them, and we arrange all the ground transportation and the coordination with the arrival facility as well. So it's bedside to bedside. We take a lot of the burden off of the case managers at hospitals and off the family members who are trying to attempt this transport themselves.
You know, that sounds like a great idea because, you know, being a nurse myself, when I think of, I've never heard this kind of service before, to be honest with you. I've known a lot of ER nurses, ICU nurses who've done the air ambulance thing, but I didn't know there was like an alternative per se. So does a nurse have to have like a special certification to do air transport?
Not on commercial aircraft, not with us, not within the industry. There is an industry accrediting body. And to be accredited, a commercial escort company like myself has to utilize ICU or ER trained nurses who have 2 years of experience in either the ICU or the ER. And so if you've got your ACLS, your BLS, and you've got 2 years in either ER or ICU, you can work for us. There are some specific things we will train you on: aeromedical medicine, flight physiology. You have to know how oxygen is going to change up at altitude and things like that, how the altitude is going to affect the patient physically. But we provide that training. There is a certified flight nurse certification that exists, and we prefer working with them because they are more experienced and more highly educated. But we work with those nurses who have 2 years of ICU or 2 years of ER experience, and then we can train them to do the rest.
So you don't need both ER and ICU, you just need one or the other, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, one or the other.
So when you're transporting patients, are we talking domestically, internationally? Like what locations are kind of hotbeds, or is it just in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So we transport patients anywhere in the world that the United States State Department says is safe to travel to. So we're both domestic and international.
And like, say if I was a nurse who was interested in this, because I've known nurses that wanted to do some of the flight nursing. I've known some nurses that have actually done that before. But what are some of the logistics issues? Like if I need to transport a patient internationally, does the nurse have to have a passport? Like, how do they get set up in doing this?
Yes, absolutely. All our nurses are required to have valid passports because we, quite often do international trips, and it takes quite a while to obtain a passport, and we can't wait for the nurse to obtain the passport. In fact, we do so many international trips that we prefer nurses who have visas to certain locations. So we've got some nurses who have visas to China. Those visas, fortunately, last 10 years. We have some nurses on our in our network that have international passports, so they are dual citizens and often citizens of countries in Latin America, and so they don't need visas to go to places like Cuba and other places in Latin America. So it's very helpful for our nurses to have that type of international access.
Say if I was a nurse and I had my passport as well, and a patient is needed to be transferred to that country, am I allowed to make a small, like, I don't want to say vacation as well, but do some of the nurses travel in those countries after transporting a patient?
Absolutely. That's one of the factors that is so attractive to the nurses who work with us because it is a chance for them to travel internationally. And if their schedule allows, they can stay in the location where they are and pay for their hotel, and they've got their flight paid to this international, perhaps exotic location that they wouldn't have decided to travel to just on their own. And so that opportunity to experience different cultures and to travel is definitely one of the prime motivators for many of our nurses. It's an opportunity for them to broaden their professional horizons as well, but we get a lot of nurses who just love to travel.
Yeah, because that was the appeal for when I did travel nursing in my past, was the opportunity to see certain cities that I would probably never get a chance to live in or at least visit unless I was working out there, of course.
And when we're talking to nurses about potentially working with us, it's helpful that they do have that love or that experience because when you're abroad, if you've ever been abroad, there are vast differences between cultures and how things get done in different countries. And so when you're with a patient and things are not how they work at home, it's important to have some experience with different cultures so you don't get flustered and so you can provide the best care and keep your calm in front of the patient. So that international experience is preferred, but not necessary.
Yeah, that's a great point because one of my great friends, Gina, she was a nurse who actually happened to work in the ER, and she worked in Saudi Arabia, and she was on the show, and she explained some of the differences, the cultural differences, and how she kind of like tried to assimilate a little bit into their culture and some of the struggles that she had. Working abroad can be a challenge, but it can also be a great thing. But going back, you were saying some of these air ambulances or the medical transport, kind of ICU up in the sky. Are there doctors on board? Like, what other staff is there involved, or is it only the nurse that's involved with the patient care for Paradigm Care?
For Paradigm Care, it's far and away just a nurse. The air ambulances, because they have the ICU equipment and they have the more critical patients, they utilize doctors. We have doctors in our network, but they're usually not utilized. There are some partners that we have that actually request doctors. A lot of for example, foreign insurance companies and foreign travel assistance companies, for some reason, prefer doctors, even though nurses are more often the right choice to deliver the type of care that we're delivering.
Right.
It's just a status thing for some of these foreign companies. But by far, we utilize nurses for our transports.
What are some of the common types of ailments or patients that you see that are being transported in a service like yours?
Yeah, so we transport patients with oxygen requirements. There are portable oxygen concentrators that the FAA has approved to take on aircraft, and they need to be monitored. Some airlines require that a third person is there to monitor the portable oxygen concentrator. Some other conditions are simple mobility issues. Actually, we have more than you would imagine from the behavioral health care areas. We have some behavioral health patients that we transport, but it's usually oxygen, mobility. We have some pain management patients that we transport, some IV maintenance care that's being given. Those are the major types of patients that we transport right there.
So behavioral health, are you talking about like psychiatric patients, that kind of thing?
Yes, I am.
Are those patients, that's their only ailment or that's their only problem is the behavioral health issue, or they have medical on top of the psychiatric background?
I'd say it's about half and half. Sometimes, half the time, it's just the behavioral health challenge that they're facing.
Okay.
And on those transports, we take special steps. We require that 2 nurses accompany the patient, and one of the nurses is required to be of the same sex as the individual for
I see.
bathroom breaks and whatnot. And we want to have the nurses have backup in case something happens.
Got it. So is there any situation where a nurse would actually go to another country to bring them back to the U.S., or is it that you just fly them out to another country?
It works both ways. It depends on which of our partners is sending us the case or which individual calls us from our website. But we do both. We bring patients back to the United States, and we also take patients abroad. So, one example would be the case where you've got a tourist from England who comes to America and gets sick and is not covered by the health insurance companies here. He ends up in a hospital here. The hospital wants to return him to his home country where he's covered. The hospital will call us up and ask us to repatriate him. Then you've got the opposite. Let's say you go to Italy to ski the Alps. You hit your head on a tree and you get airlifted to a hospital to stabilize you for your brain injury. Your health insurance will pay for that. But once you're stabilized and you need to return home to America, if you need a nurse to accompany you, your health insurance won't pay for that because you're stable. So hopefully you have travel insurance. Your travel insurance will pay for us to transport you back to your home. And if you don't have travel insurance, then that's going to be an out-of-pocket expense for you, which is where the commercial escort companies come in. They're a much more cost-effective way to accomplish that than the air ambulances. We can do, for about 10% of the cost of an air ambulance, we can do the same transport.
So let me ask you this. If you're traveling outside the country, are you getting travel insurance?
Absolutely. I recommend everyone get travel insurance. You never know when you're going to end up.
I never even thought about that. I never even thought about like travel insurance, cover, if you're stable enough, then you might not get a medical, transport, or your insurance won't cover it. But that's good to know.
Yeah, I have it for my family. We have it for our nurses. It's an important thing to think of.
Yeah. Have you traveled abroad before? Have you traveled internationally?
I have. I've actually lived abroad for quite some time. After college, I traveled to Europe and taught English there for several years. When I was in college, I did a study abroad program and fell in love with European cultures and decided I wanted to spend more time there. So I lived in Italy for several years. I lived in Florence and Rome in Italy, and then spent some time in Stockholm, Sweden as well. Those were some of the best times of my life. I don't regret that for a moment. I learned so much and had so many great life experiences. I did live for a while in Hawaii, which is not technically a foreign country,
right.
But the culture there is so different with the strong Asian influence and the strong Polynesian Hawaiian influence that it's almost like a different country.
Right. And do are a lot of patients transferred from Hawaii to the mainland or back and forth?
I wouldn't say a lot, but there is probably more than you'd imagine.
Right.
You've got a large American military presence there, and we do work for the military. You've got a lot of tourists, and Hawaii is a very kinetic, active place where people are engaging in activities where they do get injured, and sometimes they get sick. So, yeah, Hawaii has probably more activity there from the medical transport side than you would imagine.
You explain your traveling story, through college and a little bit about Paradigm. I want to know, how did you come up with Paradigm itself? How did the process take?
Yeah, great question, because, like you said, you've never heard of this type of business and you are in the medical industry.
Right.
I never would have thought for a second that this could be a viable business. I just happened to stumble upon it. Originally, I started my professional career practicing law. I practiced personal injury law, including a little bit of medical malpractice. Don't hold it against me. Um, and
I'll
yeah,
try
I
not to
just
hold it against you. Yeah.
I just hated it. I ended up really hating it. I'm the type of person who likes to work with people, collaborate, help people, and the practice of law and trial law in that personal injury area was just too adversarial for me. It was just a slog fighting day in and day out, and I was helping my clients, but I didn't get that feeling of helping them every day. So I quit practicing law. I'm a recovering attorney, as they say now, and and so I went into business consulting because, in addition to my law degree, I have an MBA and a master's in entrepreneurship, and that was sort of my first love. So I went to business consulting from there, and one of my clients happened to operate one of these commercial escort companies, and I just immediately, as soon as he told me about the industry and the business model, I immediately fell in love with it and was just captivated by it. And over time, we actually entered into negotiations for me to purchase the company, but those negotiations fell through. But it was too late for me. I was hooked. I wanted to be part of the industry, and I decided I was going to launch my own company, and thus was born Paradigm Care.
That's awesome. What are you looking for, like the company itself, when you're creating it? What kind of people do you want working for you? Like, what were some of or what do you see as best fit for the company culture?
Yeah, we are creating a culture, a very specific culture here. And it sort of harkens back to my studies, my business studies. I first learned about servant leadership and then the service delivery models of Ritz-Carlton and Disney and these famous award-winning companies. So I wanted to instill those values that I had, that I learned about in this company. And so we believe that service to others is a calling and that no one should face challenges alone. And so we are creating and have created a customer and patient experience program based on these masters of service. Service to others is, sort of our rent for our days here, the rent that we pay for our days here on earth, and we owe it to others, and our customer experience program allows us to live those values. And we go above and beyond to create personalized, special, memorable experiences for our patients. We understand they're going through some difficult times, but it doesn't mean that they can't have some special experiences with us, like you might experience at a Ritz-Carlton hotel or a Disney park. It's not going to be all fun and games all the time, but we're here to make it the best possible experience for them in this difficult time.
So, what process does Paradigm use to give patients that special experience or special care?
We, we have our Platinum Pledge, which is we place ourselves in the shoes of our patients. So we really understand from their perspective what's best for them. It's called the Platinum Pledge because it is, harks back to the Platinum Rule. There's the Golden Rule and there's the Platinum Rule. So everyone's familiar with the Golden Rule. Well, the Platinum Rule is a bit of a paradigm shift, and that's where our name comes from. It's that paradigm shift from the Golden Rule to the Platinum Rule. The Platinum Rule states, do unto others as they would have them do unto you. So you have to place yourself in their shoes. It's not do unto them as you would like. It's do unto them as they would like. We have techniques like active listening. We have techniques to address any complaints that do arise. Lots of companies will say, or lots of staffing companies will say, well, let me talk to the manager about that, or we can't do that. It's against our policy. But at Paradigm Care, we say, I'm here for you. I'm going to fix this problem. And our nurses and our staff are empowered to do that. They don't have to talk to managers to fix problems. They're empowered actually to spend $100 of the company's money without talking to anyone to fix a customer's problem. So if they spill coffee on their favorite pair of jeans, or if they spill wine or stain the pair of their clothing somehow, they can purchase a new pair of jeans right away, no questions asked. So we really want to provide the best possible experience for our patients. And these are several of the ways that we do that. So
you talked about how you give nurses the flexibility to make their own choices without going higher up, which is great. But how else do you support nurses? Because there's some that are listening right now that are thinking, how do I get involved in this industry? How do I get involved with Paradigm Care?
yes, absolutely. So, and some nurses are probably also thinking they're going to be providing care in the cramped quarters of an airplane, or maybe in an airport, and they're not used to that. And we do support our nurses, I think, as best as we can, and probably better than other companies. I have some nurses who work with me that worked for other companies, who have voiced their concern that in some other companies they're left out on their own to forge their own path, in foreign cultures, or on the road when things go wrong. And that's something that's never going to happen with Paradigm Care. We've got our flight coordinators and myself who are there to support the nurses if something goes wrong in any way. But beyond that, we have a preventative program in place so that it's much less likely that things will go wrong. So we have several checklists in place to prevent things from happening, like, let's say you're abroad with a respiratory therapist. Sometimes our nurses travel with respiratory therapists, and
Right.
the equipment is not working properly, and it just so happens that this equipment is unfamiliar to the respiratory therapist.
Right.
We've got things like that have happened before, and so we've learned from them, and so we've got checklists in place to make sure that the equipment is familiar to everyone who's going to be involved in the transport. That's a real complex and sort of extreme example, but we've got checklists for how to work with the portable oxygen concentrator to make sure you've got enough batteries for the whole flight. It's these type of small things that can make the trip very quickly become complicated if they go wrong. So we support our nurses and personnel with these checklists. We also provide, I think, some very good professional liability insurance at a highly subsidized rate. So we've got $1 million of professional liability insurance for our nurses per incident, and $3 million in aggregate for the year. We also, since I did mention we prefer certified flight nurses, and not every nurse has that certification, we
Right.
do offer a program where after 10 flights with us, we will pay for your certified flight nurse certification. We also subsidize travel insurance for our nurses as well. So there are several ways we support our nurses, because they are just as important to us as our patients. Our patients and nurses are incredibly important to us. We want to make sure that we never put their licenses at risk. We want to make sure that we never put our patients at risk. Safety is first. Our nurses are first in this organization.
So if I'm a nurse and I'm looking to get into this industry, can I do it part-time as well, or is this like a full-time gig?
Yeah, great question. It's a part-time job. It's an independent contractor contract for nurses to work with Paradigm Care. In fact, we require our nurses to have full-time or part-time jobs at other facilities to maintain their skill set when they're not flying with us, because they're not going to fly with us, every day. There's just aren't that many requirements. People don't get injured and sick that often. I've never known anyone who needed this, and you probably haven't either. You said you didn't know about this business, so it's not an everyday occurrence. So our flight nurses aren't flying every day, so they're required to have full or part-time jobs at other facilities to maintain their certifications and their experience. And this is an opportunity for them to travel and broaden their professional horizons.
So if I was looking to get started in this, how would I, look into Paradigm Care and reach out to them?
Yes, visit our website. It's paradigmcare.com. PARADIGMCARE, paradigmcare.com. And there's a career page there that talks about our culture and who would be a good fit to work with us, as well as some of the requirements that we talked about, like 2 years in the ICU or ER. And it's helpful if you live near an international airport. A lot of our flight nurses do, but it's not a requirement. It's helpful if you have that international travel experience. It's not required. We are looking for the nurses for whom our values resonate. So if you go to our website and you're reading about the way we do business and that really resonates with you and you feel like you want to be a part of it, we'd love to talk to you. If it doesn't grab you immediately, you might not be the best fit for us. Call us and ask questions. Maybe you just need some questions answered before you realize it is a good fit for you.
Well, thank you, Art, for coming on to NSR, that's National Scrubs Radio, and telling us about your company, Paradigm Care. That's a medical transport company on commercial air. You're welcome back anytime.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Derek. It's been fun to talk to you about it and to tell everyone else about it. And safe travels, Derek.
All right. Thanks, Art.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to NSR, National Scrubs Radio, with your host, Derek J. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit Facebook and Twitter at Nat Scrubs Radio. We'll catch you next time.